Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another live edition of Mic'd Up Sports, the show that goes in depth with the people who build our sports community. If you're watching us live on Facebook, thanks for joining us. Feel free to drop a comment, and as long as it's PG, because there might be children watching, we may read it on the air. And if you're watching this on demand through our YouTube channel, we're thankful you can join us there as well. Joining me is one of only two women in the entire state of Minnesota to win a Minnesota girls basketball state championship as a player and coach. Kiara Buford won 2 state titles with St. Paul Central and then won a Class AAA state championship as the head coach for Robbinsdale Cooper. In between, she scored over 1,500 points at the University of Minnesota. And even though she's taking a break from coaching, Kiara, I get the feeling we will find you back in the game of basketball in some way, shape, or form. But thanks for joining us. And I just want to say thanks for putting up with me all these years. I think it was about 15 years ago when you and I first crossed paths, and we still can't get rid of each other.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I was just thinking about that earlier, back to your Harding days when we were coming to play our games and you do the pre-game interviews. But no, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And yeah, I definitely miss basketball since it's been 2 years, I think now, since I haven't been coaching. I'm just spending a lot of more time with my kids and working on a couple other things. I've been working on projects and things that I want to do and launch coming up here soon. So just putting that effort, but definitely going to be back working and doing sports stuff here soon.
Well, even last year, you couldn't stay away from the game. You were an usher. I don't know what your official role was for the state tournaments. And then I remember we caught up, said hello. And then the next day we find out, oh, there's no tournament because that was when the coronavirus pandemic shut everything down. I think it was that same day where there was a positive test in an NBA game, and that's what led everyone to let off the gas. If you don't mind going back to that moment, Kiara, it's been almost a year since that moment. What would you make of it? Because you and I, we probably would have been watching a lot of basketball, doing our things. I know I would have been in the middle of another prep season, and here we are stuck at home communicating virtually.
Right? No, definitely a lot has changed in the last year. I love that job, by the way. It was a team host job for the state tournament. Just from playing in it to coaching in it, to even just be there to support. So even for this year, I'm like, I hope we can make it to the end of the season to get a state tournament going, whatever that may look like. We'll see. But yeah, I just remember trying to get to the end, and we were in the quarterfinals, I think. Then just having to tell everybody that the tournament was canceled was, I think, the craziest part. You know, you got teams that are they've been working all season to go to the state championship, and they finally get a game or 2 games from it, and then it gets canceled. It's like you got your chair pulled off from under you. So especially for the seniors, I think that part was tough. Just seeing some of their reactions when I had to go to the locker room and tell them this was your last game, you know. So definitely a whirlwind. And I commend the students and the student athletes that are still playing and are sacrificing their time and what they would normally be doing to still play and stick with it and just get through it, because it's tough. I couldn't imagine that being my situation in high school. So,
and we were talking beforehand, there were a couple of players who told me that I was making the smart play by staying home. I've mentioned this before, but after I had a close call with the virus and some other factors, I said, this isn't worth it right now. And there were players who are playing for high school teams as we speak who are telling me, yes, staying safe is a good thing right now. And I'm going, that is not something I expected to hear, but we've seen the gamut of emotions. I know players are eager to update their reels, try to get the word out to scouts in case they haven't committed to a college yet. But at the same time, we have seen positive tests from these gatherings and pro sporting events. The college basketball season has been an absolute mess. Several teams ended up canceling their seasons, and the high school fall season was ended abruptly for the same reason. So as much as we try to preserve this normalcy, there are constant reminders that it's a guessing game and we're really not in as much control as we'd like to be.
Right. No, I agree. And you kind of, I say it at work, but you learn to go with the flow. If change was hard for you before, I think everybody's getting a little bit more accustomed to be able to adapt and change and be uncomfortable a little bit. So, yeah, but it's definitely been crazy. And today's kids are a lot luckier the way that they can use social media and reels and highlights and distribute their stuff as well. That's also another thing that we've been talking about recently.
Yeah, we didn't have Twitter or Instagram or any of that when you were making your way through high school. That was just coming into form.
Right. And even when I was coaching, like I had the field level app, and there was tons of coaches on there that always reach out, and I was able to put profiles for my players down and share their stuff and share their stats and share video and stuff like that. So, so, times have changed. This is nice.
Well, speaking of those times, Kiara, let's go to the start of your journey. Do you remember your first moment of memory that got you hooked on the sport of basketball?
My mom used to play, so watching her when I was super little and playing in the driveway, it was just something we always did. My grandparents had a hoop on the outside of their garage that I would shoot at a lot when I was younger. So I would say those were my earliest days. And then I played rec ball at Conway Rec Center. So I would say that was the start of everything.
That was right. Your mother did play. In fact, she made a state tournament of her own. And perhaps it was thankful that it was long before overtime and all the other basketball accounts were created, because I could only imagine how mortified she and several of her colleagues from that era would be if all of those highlights were to surface now.
Right. Well, we got a couple videos. I've
That's
seen
true.
some film
Yeah.
with those little shorts, and I don't even know what her hairstyle was called.
Well, the
Feathered
mullet.
back. Yeah, something like that.
The mullet was big in the 80s. I'm sure she could tell you that, and she's probably going to recoil in terror when she sees this part of the video because we brought that up. Kiara, I think you and I, we escaped from when we were in high school. But as you were making your way through, of course, we know you went to St. Paul Central and became part of the super teams that won 2 state titles. But do you recall your first varsity game and what that experience was like?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who we played my first game. I remember being nervous because I was trying to, just make my way as a freshman and starting and getting just trying to break ground and put everything together. So it was just different. It's a different speed when you're really out there. I wish I could remember. I can picture it in my head, but I can't remember who we played. That would be interesting to think of, but I do remember it.
You probably won by 30 or 40, right?
I have no idea. No, our first couple games were always close. Like I remember we used to play Centennial first.
Oh, that's right.
In the tournament. Then they got us a couple times. They were like one of our only losses, like every year. But the beginning was always a little, and then we would take off and build up as the season went on.
Well, on the subject of your mother, she actually dropped a comment and calls you a baller.
Thanks, Mom.
Actually, I still think you could ball and get a few buckets in there if you decided to lace them up.
Yeah, if my knee sticks together. I played in the Y League the last couple of years with Lakita, who I've coached with at Cooper. And obviously we see a little bit of everybody there. Ashley Ellis-Milan, Jenna Smith has played with us. Courtney Boylan will play when she's not overseas. So I do great until my knee. I was having a knee issue, but I think I got it together now. It's been feeling better, but it's the little things. The little things.
Yeah, then you realize, I'm not so young as I used to be.
Right. I'm like, usually something used to have to happen. Like, you got hit or you twisted something when you get an injury and nothing happened. They're just like, you're trying to do too much and you're not that age anymore. But overall, I think I still got it. So
I am not in a position to dispute that claim, Kiara. I will just assume that you can still hoop. And you noted playing Centennial, that's right, St. Paul Central. I think they still take part in that Pat Patterson Hamlin tip-off event. And when you were playing, Centennial was one of those contenders that could run with you. I remember one such instance where they did get the win in your second state championship season. But as you were making your way through, as you got older and you got more help too, St. Paul Central, they were good. When you came in as a freshman, I think that was Ashley Ellis-Milan's senior season. You also had Kiara Buford. She was pre-low at the time. And then you probably were so cool that she decided to take your name.
Small world, right?
I tease. That's not why she took your surname. She got married to someone with the surname. And I'm going, are you two related by any chance, you and Tarad, or is that just pure coincidence?
Yeah, it's a coincidence. There's a family of Bufords in the community, but we're not related. But there's a few other people we've had to check a couple times just to make sure.
I'm sure the two of you have had some jokes, though, since then. You and Dee just kind of jokingly referencing each other as sisters, all of that now.
Yeah, she's always my sister. Once we play together, it's official.
But going back to who you got to play with as a freshman, the outgoing seniors, Ashley Ellis-Milan, Kiara Buford, and Danielle Ellison.
And yeah, Brittany Tyner was a senior that year. I'm trying to think who else was a senior. I think everybody else was pretty young. But yeah, my freshman year, and I had that was what helped us be, grow and be good too, is I came into a strong team, and then even the years before when I got there, watching Nakia Carlisle play at Central, because, I played for her dad and traveling for years growing up. So yeah, just always watching those guys and being able to play with them was great. So I'm glad me and, Ashley got to get that 1 year in high school in together.
And how did that help you develop and grow as a player, getting to play alongside several athletes who would go on to play college basketball? Dejanay actually played 2 sports at St. Thomas when they were still Division III. Danielle played at St. Cloud State. Of course, Ashley went to the school you went to as well in Minnesota. But having those 3, you had a lot of talent and leadership. How did that resonate with you?
I mean, like I said, I feel like you learn from you have a culture that you set up, right? And so when you're young, you kind of just come into that culture and you take things, you absorb. So just everything that I was able to absorb from them. And we went to state my freshman year. We took 3rd. So getting those experiences and having them kind of walk you through it the first time, get your feet wet, you feel a little bit more comfortable. I think those things were huge. And then obviously, like when they graduate, we got to kind of step into that role. And I think of all the players that I played with after that and how we all contributed and, they all went D1. So just being able to play with that talent all the time was great. Like you can't ask for more to have better teammates than we had when I was at Central.
And on the subject of state tournaments, you were part of a long streak at St. Paul Central when Willie Taylor was the head coach there. But after Ashley, Danielle, and Dejanay all graduated, the next year, your sophomore season, here comes Angel Robinson, who had made a name for herself at Johnson. She decided to make the move to St. Paul Central. You didn't win state that year, but to get somebody who, I think she ended up winning Miss Basketball, if I'm correct, as a senior, 2007. Yep. To get someone of her caliber, what was your take on that, and how exciting was it to make that kind of transition where, yes, you lost a lot of talent, but now you've got somebody who was a pretty stellar athlete?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me and Angel were like this. So I also learned a lot from Angel, and I watched her play even before, because she was playing in 8th grade, back over at Johnson. So I got to play her before I was even able to play high school basketball, because we couldn't play in 7th and 8th grade in St. Paul. So just watching her play and then for her to be my teammate, like I was super excited, especially because we had lost Ashley and those guys, so to have someone kind of step in. And then we also had other transfers that took place too, where we lost a couple more players that we were pretty close with. So her coming in was game changing. And I think for us to even get back to state that year was big. I think we had the older group of role players that were great, like I think of Kate Schaefer and Natalie and just some of those guys that played, and just always, we were just super supportive. I think the vibes were a lot different there, but we had fun. And I think we did great by even making it to, we were 3rd. I think that's the year we lost to Kennedy. and I fouled out, and I still dispute that foul to this day. To this day.
What I find most amusing about that story, Kiara, is how much you've played alongside Jenna Smith in Wiley competition. Do the two of you trade any barbs or have any kind of fun little jokes about that game and how much you've grown since then?
Yeah, with Jenna.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and Jenna are pretty close too, and so we always talk and joke about it. And we played against each other in college, so there's tons of different moments. But I think we respect each other. So, and I also love playing with Jenna. She's on my team in the summer. I think we play really well together. We're like, we should have played together at some point. You know, we always win our different ways. But yeah, I loved playing with her, and we always joke about when we used to compete.
I can't remember what led her to go to Illinois, but she made a name for herself with the Illini. So I can't argue with the results. Would it have been fun to play alongside you and Ashley? I'm sure she would have loved that chance to do so in college. But, well, your mother's still watching this, and she still disputes that foul when you fouled out in the state semifinal in Class 4A against Jenna Smith's Kennedy team.
Yeah. True supporter. She knows.
So your first 2 years, you get to the semifinals, you end up winning the bronze medal in Class 4A. The next year, your team became the talk of the state. You know, it ultimately led to some changes in transfer procedures, but on the bright side, you got, well, and I should note, all of these athletes came from other St. Paul schools, so these are all in-district moves. But Georgie Jones from Highland Park and Kiara Taylor from Como Park decided to join you. I think Ebony Black did as well. She also was at Johnson. And I don't know what led to this creation, but all of a sudden, you know, you have yourself, Angel Robinson, and then Megan Howard, Abby Gust, or also veterans coming back. St. Paul Central, they had what I call this super team. As far as were they the best ever in Minnesota, that's not something I get into because, you know, like the Hopkins team that went undefeated a couple years ago or Lakeville North, I just don't think there's a way to really compare the two. But I think they all have something to say when it comes to women's basketball history. So your junior season, when did you find out that you were going to pick up all these big names you played against these last 2 years? And what did you make of turning into a household name?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like people always perceived it like we just got these players, but like we all knew it. We've all played with each other growing up, you know, and we live with next to each other. But St. Paul City District has so many schools. It's not like some of the suburban schools. We have like the one school there. We have 6 schools right down the street from each other. So we've all lived and grown up in the same neighborhoods and communities and played basketball. So like we weren't new to each other at all. Kiara played with me with our traveling team when we played for Kevin Carlisle. So we were really close. We wanted her to come to Central from the jump, but she had ties to going to Como. But it was a debate in the beginning if she was going to come to Central or go to Como. So I think that was always the thing, is deciding where you were going to go. And Johnson was good, and they had Angel and Ebony early on. And even us, like when we had Sasha and Alex Moore, we kind of just did a swap because we lost them. But then Ebony ended up coming over, not the first year. She played with them that first year, but the year after. So it was just a lot of movement going on, but again, within a group that we were all really familiar with each other. And I think for just that era, even outside of our team, I think inner city sports for girls basketball was at a great spot. Like I'm lucky that within the inner city, like for me now kind of living in the suburbs and I coached kind of, you know, in the Metro West, is getting a different perspective, being on the outside of it, but just all the great players that I got to watch play in the inner city, and not just St. Paul, but even Minneapolis too, and the basketball players that came through North, you know. So it was a special time, I think, for girls basketball in the inner city.
How did you adapt to all of these surroundings, and how did you make sure all of the hype didn't get to you? Because, you know, we all know you ran through the tables and completed an undefeated run, but in the midst of it, I'm sure there was a lot, you get a lot of fans. You probably got a few haters too, because you know how it is in sports. No one likes to see a team win all the time, whether it's UConn, Hopkins, or the Minnesota Lynx. It's just one of those, you become a team everyone loves to hate because, like, oh, they always keep winning. What do you remember from that season, 06-07, where not only were you winning, most of the time you were doing it convincingly, and that carried through all the way to the championship?
Right. And I think it helps a little bit when you know people want to beat you, number one. And I think like the year when we went undefeated, prior to that, we had only took third. So to us, we haven't really accomplished anything yet. So we didn't feel like we really proved anything to ourselves or others. Um, and then so I think that part of being hungry and then just doing what you do. Like you can't focus. I've always been a person. I think it's just personality and how we were coached. But we never paid attention to anything else. Like I hear about a lot of stuff probably after I played, but when I think to when we were playing and when it was going on, all we were thinking about was what our goals were and how we were going to accomplish them. So, and we just love basketball. Like that's what we did. All my friends, like all my teammates were my best friends. And it's all because we were just a little group of poopers, you know? So that's just what we did and we loved it and we were good at it. And so I'm thankful that I did get to play with girls that I played with growing up and that I was close to.
What did you enjoy most about that season and getting to play a part in history? Not many teams can win a state championship undefeated, and to do it the way you did, I'm sure you still have memories of that run to this day.
Yeah. Again, like just that we were locked in and just focused on what we wanted to do and had fun with it. So I just think everything that we worked on getting up to that point, it was just kind of like the showcasing part, you know, all the work and hard part what came before that, you know.
And not only was that year significant because of your 32-0 state tournament run, it also, I would say, was the genesis of, to this day, what I believe is the strongest rivalry in girls basketball at the time, St. Paul Central, Minneapolis South. I know you had played South, I think, before your junior season, but I'll never forget, I covered the Twin Cities game that year, and it was a sold out crowd. Now, South doesn't have a huge gym capacity, but you had Tayler Hill, who was becoming a household name in her own right. And of course, by that point, everyone wanted to see what the St. Paul Central team was about. And that crowd carried over to the state championship. But when you got ready and your last regular season game, you see a sellout. Women's basketball at the time was getting some traction, but not at the level it is now. So to see a sellout crowd for effectively a bonus game, it's a game with pride on the line, nothing else. And then you see the entire lower bowl filled up for that Central South final a few weeks later. What did you make of the environment?
That's the fun part, right? You know, I think those are the moments that were fun for us and why we played, you know. So the inner city games are always big to us, whether everybody else thinks so or not, you know, whether we just happen to be really good, us and South, in, you know, being able to be state competitive teams. But I think even when those teams weren't going to state, those games are always fun to go to and competitive. So, you know, we always took pride in those, and just having everybody come out. Like I will never forget those games and the games where we had at South, where they had to stop before the game in because it was like a fire hazard because there's people sitting in they were sitting on the stairs of the bleachers. And then so I remember they had to clear people out and they shut the doors. And I just remember looking over to like that little side door that's in the back. And you know, they have the little window in there and all you can see is people's faces, you know, in the window trying to look from the outside because they couldn't get in. So that was fun. I love that environment. I think playing in an environment like that in high school at that age is what allowed me to carry that over to college and playing in front of a big crowd. Like it was nothing, you know, after I had experienced that and what we experienced at the Target Center. It doesn't get better than that. So.
Well, that rivalry carried over the following year. Angel Robinson, by that point, was playing at Marquette, but just about everyone else came back. Ebony Black also graduated as well, but the rest of the group, yourself, you were a senior, Megan Howard and Tiara Taylor, Georgie Jones, you all stuck around. And I think Kiani Johnson, if I remember, became one of the role players who contributed. But you noted Centennial, one of those teams that always seem to have your number. They start the season that first weekend, you lose to them, and then you lost a couple more games, two of them to Minneapolis South. The first one, South won convincingly. The second one was a bit closer. But what do you think those losses did to motivate you and remind you that, hey, what happened last year is last year. This is a whole new season.
Right. We needed those, to be honest. You go a whole year without losing. I think Angel was an amazing leader. So I think even like my leadership, gets tested at that point, being the senior. And yeah, we had players that stepped up. Tierra had a great season that year. Biddy Johnson, we call her Biddy. She
Right.
had a great year. She scored that. I just remember that shot she hit in state. But I feel like if South wouldn't have beat us those two times during the season in that intercity game, I'm not sure that we would have beat them for the state championship. I think those two games prepared us to be able to defeat them in that last game. So I was kind of thankful we dropped those two and won when it mattered. But yeah, those were tough for us. We just, a different look, a different team. Taylor was a little bit older, and we knew each other, so our teams knew each other so well. So it was tough for us to beat them that last year.
And I remember Willie Taylor, he was, of course, your head coach at Central at the time. And now look what he's doing at Stillwater. He keeps bringing them back to state. But I remember him telling me something along the lines of not relishing a loss. I mean, no coach, no player wants to lose. But he said, this will probably help us more than some people might think, because he felt that 32-0 season didn't offer a lot of challenges. And that wasn't a knock on himself or you guys. You just took care of business and did a really good job of doing so. So you earned all of those runaway wins, but that following year, you got some reminders that it's a competitive field. And I would say the parity has only gotten better in the last few years, but that 4A field was not one to be taken lightly. How would you say Willie Taylor's guidance, his philosophy, and his work with you, how did that help you grow as an athlete and also prepare yourself for having the target on your back, but trying to move forward at the same time?
I think I've just been lucky in general to play for great coaches and coaches with strong basketball IQs. Willie knows the game. So he taught me a lot about the game. And I think I've always kind of considered myself to be a student of the game and had fairly decent relationships with my coach to try and learn from them. But for Willie, I just feel like he always believed in me. Like, I would come with our traveling team and we'd scrimmage the ninth graders when I was in probably 6th through 8th grade. And so we'd always kind of talk then. And so he knew of me and knew my game a little bit, but always was confident in what I could do as a player. So I think that kind of just helped me kind of grow into my own.
So your senior season in high school, you referenced this before, you beat South again in the state championship in that third meeting. And I remember a late friend of mine, Tony Gear, saying as much. He was like, yeah, I don't think a team is going to win this series 3 times. And you never know with basketball. South could have won that third time, but they didn't. What did you sense was different? I know that it was a lower scoring game than the first two, so I don't want to say you played it more deliberately, but that was something that was bucking the trends we had seen in the prior 4 meetings. But what did you sense was different that helped you get past South after they had beaten you twice before?
I just think being hungry. For me, it was just me being a senior. Like, I can't speak for everybody else, but it was my last year. So I'm like, you get to a point where you kind of you put everything out there and you give it your all. You don't have anything to lose. So I kind of went into that moment with that mindset. That was my last game. Like, I knew that there was no coming back. There was no redos. So you try your best and you give it your all. And for me, I was a leader for my team. So I'm very vocal. I'm kind of coaching my teammates on the floor. listening to my coach, making sure we're doing what we need to do. So all those little things I think help pay off in the end.
And although you didn't go undefeated that season, I think 28-4 was the record. That was the first time Central had won back-to-back. They had won a couple of state titles back in the 70s when girls basketball was sanctioned as a state high school league sport. But you got a back-to-back state championship for this inner city school when it became clear you were going to win that second one. And I think it was a nail biter until the end. Mm-hmm. What do you remember from that moment?
Just being happy. I don't remember much just because it goes so fast. I've been able to like watch stuff, hindsight, but just being ecstatic. And then thinking about the next steps, obviously, of going to the U. That was big for me. I'm going to college. So I think I immediately had to change gears because we graduate the end of May, early June. I was at the U June 6th after my senior year. So I was already trying to prep to get ready to go to college.
And on the subject of college, do you recall when you got your first offer, how many schools you were considering, and what ultimately led you to attend Minnesota?
Just got to ask these questions, huh, Mike? A lot. I was recruited by most Big Ten schools, minus a few. And so like not Ohio State, not really, but pretty much everybody else, Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, Iowa. Ultimately, at the end, I wanted to stay home. I wanted to play in front of my family. The U just came off of that Sweet 16. We're a little bit removed from the Lindsay Whalen era, which I was, watching, being a ball girl growing up for. So that was my part. My only thing is, yes, I had a lot of options, and I wish that I would have took other visits. I didn't take any of my visits. So I just wish I would have been a little bit more patient, and I committed to the U my sophomore year in high school. So I was a very young verbal commitment. And I don't say that like I regret going to the U, but just as part of the process, and now that I get to experience the process as an adult and even as a coach, I wish I would have explored some other schools as well, just to check them out. Because I remember I got a letter from UConn, and I was like nervous, like, oh, I could never go play, just for UConn, and just thinking of what it would be, or even Temple. I was recruited by Temple, and I would have loved to play for her, and you don't think about those things when you're young and you got all this stuff being thrown at you. But I stuck with the U and committed when I was a sophomore and went straight over when I graduated.
And I will clarify, in case you don't know who Kiara was referencing, at the time, Dawn Staley was still coaching at Temple before she took the South Carolina job. And I did not know that UConn and Temple had sent you letters. And your story, Kiara, that's something I've heard a lot about, even from athletes who finished their careers a little more recently. They've all told me they wish they were more diligent in their selection process, that they would have considered more schools. And you know how this works, going through this experience as an athlete yourself, and then as a coach, having to guide athletes that were once your age, or you were once their age. Oh my, I'm getting tongue-tied here. And just based on that, what would you recommend to college athletes who get those offers? Because when people send you letters or coaches pay scouting visits, they're going to give you their elevator pitch. Everyone's going to give you, the best version of what they have to offer. And sometimes it works out. Other times you find out it doesn't. In your case, it did. You had a fine career at Minnesota, even if you didn't have a ton of tournament appearances like some other athletes did. But as you said, there's a part of you that wishes you had spent a little more time considering everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, and just for me, I think knowing what you want, right? Like, what are your ultimate goals? I would say being patient. I didn't watch a lot of girls basketball. I'm gonna be honest. Growing up, I watched some of the WNBA because that was, the thing. But I didn't watch like girls college basketball. I watched NBA, boys college, and then the WNBA. So just even being familiar with programs, their history, what type of style they play. Because I always wonder, like, what would my game have looked like if I would have went ACC or SEC and played super fast, up tempo, rather than like that half court game in the Big Ten, because that was my strength. But as a a recruit, I'm not thinking about that, So little things like that, and then thinking about what things are your deal breakers. What do you not want to be far? Can you not live in Florida and your parents are up in Minnesota? I know players whose parents moved with them, which would have never been a thing for me. So, just thinking about what you need and what you're looking for. Also, considering your life outside of basketball, right? What do you want to go to school for? What does that school have a good program when it comes to stuff like that? But and then it's a feel. And that's why I say about just being able to give other places. Like I was kind of set that I knew I wanted to go to the U, but I wish I would have just got to feel other places out, because sometimes you get somewhere and it just feels right and you connect with people or the place or anything. So just even having that opportunity, I think those would be my main things that I would suggest.
I'm surprised you didn't give other schools more consideration, Kiara, because had you considered UConn or Temple, you could have gotten as far away from me as possible.
No, that's funny. And by the end, it was more so a lot of Big Ten schools that I was talking to the most. Because you got to remember, I committed when I was a sophomore. So then you're getting a lot of those letters. The letters, yeah, watch out for the letters that they send to everybody, right? You get some people like, I got all these letters, but they're like the questionnaires that go out. But yeah, just being able to explore and look into other programs. Or like I would say, I used to always get this letter from Green Bay. And I'm like, Green Bay, Wisconsin. My grandparents lived there, and I just knew nothing about it. And again, me not knowing sports, they were super successful when I was in college in their division that they played in. So just kind of having that burst of knowledge. But I think at the end, when it came down to other Big Ten schools, I was like, why wouldn't I stay home? And so it came down to like me wanting to represent my home state over the bordering schools. And I think if I would have explored another option, it would have been somewhere far or very hot to get away from the snow.
But you stayed here, and look what happened.
Yeah. I love it. Like I said, I don't regret it. It's been it's helped me grow and become who I am today. And I'm even now, like I've been working with Pam's Empower program and Kelly Taylor, who was our team manager at the time. I recently have been partnering with them to do Empower coaching and work with our youth and our girls on a variety of different topics. And that's been great. So, just little things like that have kind of helped bridge me to get me to where I am now.
Well, Kiara, I'm glad you brought up that point, because when you're an athlete and when you're a fan, I think that perspective changes when you become a media member like myself, and you realize real quick you don't have any control over who wins or loses. And once you make that realization, you can just go along for the ride. But when you have an investment and it's based on your win-loss record, people, they love you when you win. When you're not winning so much or you're struggling, they start to wonder like, hey, what's wrong with you? And I remember Pam Borton didn't leave Minnesota on the best of terms after the Final Four run, but as you alluded to, she has found a new career path and has done quite well. I know she does a lot of public speaking engagements. And even though you didn't have Final Four appearances on your resume, you've done pretty well for yourself. And my point is, what happens, how you're remembered goes far beyond win-loss records, points, all of that. At some point, folks won't remember how many points you scored, but they will remember the character you portrayed and the legacy that you left. And from what you're telling me, you found a groove. Pam Borton has done well since her coaching days ended, and it just goes to show you that everyone, these athletes and coaches, it's important to remember that they are far more than what their win-loss record suggests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's tough, and basketball is political, and I think that's another moment where I learned a lot from that. I built a lot of character during that, and I'm sure she did too as a coach. She went on to write a book after, so little things like that help shape kind of what you do. But yeah, great experiences just to be around great leaders. I think that's one thing about Pam is she's a great leader. Whether it's basketball, whether she's talking to a group of CEOs, you know, she's on point. I think that's what her book is called. So just learning a lot of the leadership stuff from her, and even coaching. I think I took a lot of my defensive schemes and that defensive mindset that I got and played defense before I went to college. So I implemented that as a coach and was successful with that. And that worked well for my team. So just those little things. And I was thinking, you said, what did you say? Something like, would they remember certain things? But like when I was coaching Cooper, when we had won and we went to state, people really thought that was like my first or second season. They had no idea I was coaching before that. I'm like, hey, we're 5 years in. You know, I've been working with this group for a minute to get here, you know. So just, you know, what people see versus what's going on behind closed doors.
And it was no different on the Lynx beat in their championship years. Although that may not be past tense for much longer. If you've been following their free agency moves, they're looking pretty good again. But I would like to reflect on your college career because, again, you did have a lot of bright moments. Your freshman year, you got to the NCAA tournaments, and it got you a couple more years to play alongside Ashley, Ellis-Milan. And then you also had to go against several players that were either your teammates or you knew from the St. Paul City Conference. Kiara Taylor went to Iowa, so you had to go against her a few times. Tayler Hill went to Ohio State, and that created another series of fun battles. But your Gophers career, quite the bookend, actually. You started it with Ashley Ellis-Milan, your old high school teammate, as a college teammate. And then as you departed, your final season, that was Rachel Banham's first year. Most of us know what happened to her after that, but you were at the bookend of some integral moments, I would say, in your basketball career, getting to play alongside one of your mentors and then helping Rachel Banham learn the ropes. And you probably knew she was going to turn into the player she was, but going back to something you said earlier, the rest of us, even myself, are going, I had no idea she would become such a prolific scorer, but she did. And now she's playing for the pro team. So Kiara, I'd say you've got some pretty good stories if you ever decide to write a memoir.
Yeah, and that's the fun part about sports and basketball. Like when I reflect, I did this thing on Facebook where I just tagged every person that I ever played on a team with. And you'd be surprised. I didn't play on too many teams, but tons of girls, you know, and players. And even like when I went overseas, the girls that I played with, you know, that played at USC and Texas A&M and playing against Brittany Griner and going to, you know, you're going to Big Ten Media Day where we were Draymond Green, you know, so it's just like you're around all these people. And then, yes, I loved being able to play against people from our states neighboring us. You had Alyssa Carroll and Tara Steinbauer who were at Wisconsin. Kasheen and Thea were at Iowa, and Camille and Hannah Draxton. I played for North Tartan with those two. I'm trying to think who else. Georgie was at Indiana. Yeah, there's just so many people I can think of. Taylor, you know, I've always played, you know, against Taylor, and that's always a classic. So just grateful. And that's what makes it fun. That's what makes good memories. And you know, I've been working on my own projects and goals of getting involved in sports moving forward. And those are the people that come to mind. So like when I start doing my stuff, those are the people I'm calling to partner with and to work with and to teach the next generation with. So even Ashley, now she's coaching and we get to coach, you know, teams and within our cities and just pass along everything we learned to see, you know, another group of kids experience that.
Something tells me it won't be long before you call me up once you get all of these projects in order. I remember Kiara actually has spoken with me about that because she's aware of my supposed talents in video production. I don't have the heart to tell her that it's all a fake and a fabrication, that I've been making this up the whole time. I tease, of course. But how cool was it that you got to share these moments, these stories with players you grew up with? Kasheen Alexander, who can forget? I think she was one of two guards to average a double-double at one point in the entire NCAA. Angel Robinson at Marquette, even though you're not in the same conference, but in conference, you mentioned earlier, you had to play against Maya Johnson one time. And then Tayler Hill at Ohio State, she had a great career there and parlayed that into a few years in the WNBA. Iowa, for a while, they just kept coming to Minnesota the way Lehigh is now. Lisa Bluter, well, and she still did. She still is, actually. Chase Coley went to Iowa, and I think Maggie Sonato is there now. So, Iowa, they know that Minnesota has some bona fide athletes up here. Jenna Smith at Illinois, and the list goes on and on. For you, how cool was it to have all of these players, whether you were playing with them or alongside or against them, all of them were markers of the growth and development that Minnesota invests in women's basketball?
Yeah, it's special. And I said earlier, I never wanted Maya to get hurt, but her getting injured allowed me to play against her, which I probably would have never had the opportunity because she was older than me. And she probably doesn't even know, but I looked up to her when I was younger, watching those guys play. So there's special moments, and it makes you proud and happy to do what you do. And knowing that you have other people with you doing the same thing, that love the same thing that you do. Even when we were separate, we in our hearts were like, we still represented Minnesota. So even if they played for Michigan State or Iowa, like, I'm still their fan. I still went to them after the game. Like, those are my girls. I love them to death. So it was great. And there were definitely special moments that, we cherish as athletes.
And let's not forget Courtney Boylan, who went to Michigan. She beat you out for Miss Basketball when you were seniors. And the way you've spoken about her, I'm guessing the two of you don't have any hard feelings about that. It's more like, hey, it's a cool moment. And I tease, of course, but it's like, hey, sounds like all of you were proud to just share in so many stories from fellow athletes. And I imagine if I were to ask any of your former teammates or competitors, they would probably say the same about you.
I love Courtney, except for when you put the part where she beat me out for Miss Basketball. Well, no, we actually got cool when we played in the All-Star game together. We were on.
I remember that.
And that was awesome. And I love Courtney. So obviously we all want to win Miss Basketball, but she's great, and you can't take that away from her and what she did at Chaska. Even if that was a sticky point, but everything that we were able to do after that. And even now, like, we play in the Y League together, we still keep in touch, and she'll have open gyms, and she's still playing, she's still kicking it. My knee's it's a little too, I don't know if I could still play at that level. I could, but it's a lot of work. So I commend her. She's still playing at a high level at our age. So yeah, even those relationships are special. And so with Courtney, that's how I met Daniel Makepeace, who I coached. He was my coach at Cooper, but I trained with him after college, before I went overseas. And I worked with him and did camps and training and stuff like that. So that's how I met Danny. And so it's just like a small world of how all these puzzle pieces go together. It goes from her beating me in Miss Basketball and me being like, to becoming friends, and then to becoming into another opportunity to where that became the coach that helped me win a state tournament. So it all comes full circle.
It does. It does. And it sounds like you don't worry about that anymore. And let's remind the audience how hard it is to even get to be a finalist. They only pick 5 out of an entire senior class. So, to get that honor, even only one woman can win it, unless you're the Miller twins. Then they just gave both of them that award all the way back in 1997. But to be part of that final list, that means you're something special, and you certainly were something special.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. And then we had Angel, who won it the year before. And so it's like another St. Paul Central kid, so.
What do you remember most fondly about your college basketball experience?
I think going to the tournament early on. I think all of our Big Ten experiences in the Big Ten tournament definitely stick out. And I just think the growth that happens off the court. I think that's the biggest thing for me of college, and learning how to work hard, learning how to get better, structure, discipline. That's where all the real learning of basketball and the game of basketball kind of happened. Because, I knew the game, understood the game, was good at the game. But when you really kind of put it together and become a true student of the game And then, with the goal of playing professional, the importance rises a little bit for you. So I would say those, just the big tournaments and just all the kind of life lessons and lifestyle, what do I want to call them, skills that I learned in college.
On the subject of playing professionally, you did that for a year after you graduated. I think, yeah, you spent a few months here training and then you went overseas. And I don't know what your plans were, but I think I remember you saying that shortly after your first season, you discovered that you were going to become a first-time mother.
Mm-hmm.
So what were your plans professionally? Was that something you considered long-term? And what maybe led into your decision to start a career away from basketball?
Yeah. I definitely, so when I was done with college, I was tired. Just being honest, I was so tired. I played basketball I played a lot of basketball in my life, nonstop all year round since I was second grade until I was an adult. And so I think that was a hard part, just like not really having any breaks in there. And then, whereas everybody sees the good part, the fun parts, like they're not experiencing the whole thing. So that was tough for me, even going from college to pro. But I was like, I'm definitely taking this opportunity. But like I had this foot injury. It's not even injury. My toe, like there's this bone that's naturally like split. So it was irritated just from playing a lot, like just playing so much over the time. So like I was literally getting a shot before the games at the end of my career at the U just to play for the pain. And that was one of the reasons why, because like I got invited to the Lynx training camp, but that's the year they got Devereaux Peterson, and they didn't have any roster spots because they were full. They had Maya Moore, Devereaux, and like two other girls. But I still wanted to go for the experience, but I had to kind of decide, like, do I want to rest my foot so I'm able to go overseas, or do I want to take a chance and play on it and potentially like, stretch that out. So I decided to rest my foot, train, and then go overseas. And then I played overseas. I love that. It's just a completely different experience. But my league in Poland was pretty good. We had 8 WNBA players in my league. And so we had the Tina Charles that year when she won MVP. And we had Nneka Ogwumike in our conference that year, who was the rookie of the year that year. And then I played with Sydney Colson, who went to Texas A&M. They won a state title there.
National championship.
Yeah, I mean, look, state title. Excuse me.
Yes, I mean they represented the state of Texas well, right, but no. I just don't want college fans coming after you and be like, "Hey, it wasn't just a state title."
Right now, like, excuse me, Buford, we won. All right, national championship for sure. And then Bree also played. She went to USC, and then she played. Who did she play for in the WNBA? I forget off the top of my head. Gilbreth is her last name.
Who?
Brianna Gilbreth.
I'm going to punch this up.
She was on my team in Poland too. And then we had Callie. So 4 Americans, and we played, and great competition. I love that. And then, so yes, I did decide I wanted to start a family. Hey, right? We're going to start a family. So I got pregnant at the end of that year. Came home, worked. I was just working just like a normal job. I intended to have London and then go back to play. I really wanted to go play in Australia after London, just because their summer is our winter. So it's the opposite. And I wanted to do that. So that was my idea going into it. But in the middle of that, I got pregnant again, and then I was pregnant with my son, and I was coaching already. So within the job that I picked up at Cooper, that I got, through my relationship with Drew Woods, I was just going to work just, to hold time over. But then he stepped down from coaching, and then I stepped into his spot. And then I started coaching at Cooper, and then I got pregnant, and then my team was getting good. And then I was kind of just having a good time doing what I was doing. And so I never went back to overseas. And then I coached, and we won state. And I got to the point where I just wanted more time with my kids, and they're getting a little bit older to where they're probably going to be playing soon. So I really just wanted to dedicate my time to that and just slowing things down, because when you are an athlete and you play collegiate and professional basketball, like you're always on the go or you're out of town. You know, I've missed many, many holidays, Thanksgivings. I had been probably like 6 Thanksgivings in where I didn't get to spend with my family. So those are the things I was missing at the time. And I think that's why I was really gravitating to, one, starting my own family, and then slowing my life down to spend time with everybody else.
Couple of
sorry.
Oh, no. There are no wrong answers on this podcast series, Kiara. This is your canvas. You get to paint it the way you see it. But a couple of follow-ups. Brianna Gilbreath played 4 seasons in the WNBA, 2 with Phoenix, 1 with Connecticut, 1 with Indiana. And I remember a moment when you were pregnant, I think with London, and I remember just quipping like, yeah, how long before she gets her first offer? And you, with your sense of humor, said a good 15 years.
Yeah, she'll be up and coming here soon. We just started. We have like mini basketball practices in the basement. So we got the balls. The only problem is I give them the ball and they want to take off running, and we're practicing stationary dribbling. So we'll get it. But they say they're the best of their gym classes so far. So I have hope. I have some hope.
Forget basketball. I think you should sign London up for football.
True. Both of them.
So you don't have to worry about dribbling in football. But you did get to something I wanted to touch on as well. You spoke of how you got the coaching job at Cooper. And actually, that's what led me to try to get you on this series, was our mutual friend Tanisha Scott saying, hey, we should do a symposium with the Minnesota female coaches of color to share what it was like. You spent 5 years at Cooper,
Yep.
if I remember. Mm-hmm. And what led you to get that itch in coaching, and what would you make of your experience? You know, you weren't the only female who identifies as Black coaching in the state of Minnesota, but there weren't a lot of you, still aren't. I think back then it was yourself, Tanisha Scott, Alexis Gray Lawson, Crystal Flint was getting into coaching, but it's not a field where you see a lot of women who look like you leading the bench. What got you into it, and how do you think your representation mattered to the athletes at Cooper and to those who got on the gravy train when you were making your state tournament runs?
Yeah, and so it's weird how it happened, because again, I kind of say it kind of fell in my lap, but I believe that things happen for a reason. But I was planning to be just an assistant for Drew. I played AAU for him, loved him. He's one of my favorite coaches. So I was just going to be an assistant just for some extra money, because I was having a baby, you know, and I'm trying to, what is on my resume? I'm writing resumes, and it's like, basketball? Like, that's all I had, you know, my basketball, my degree. So getting a job was number one, and I was just going to do the assistant job. And then he was going to coach his sons. And so it was like right before the season. It had to be less than a month maybe or so. But anyways, he was basically saying he's going to step down, really would want me to take over. And I just remember being like, Drew, I don't think I'm ready. Like, I've never coached before. I don't know what I'm doing. And he was like, no, you got it. I'll be here for you. I'll help you with whatever you need. At the time, he had Dave Peterson and Lakita Davis were his coaches. And there was one more, I think, that I didn't end up bringing along because I just had 2 assistants at the time. But, you know, we got your back, right? So I'm like, okay, you know, and I kind of just grabbed it and was like, all right, let's go with it. So I was already working in the building, kind of building relationships with these kids. And I think the basketball part kind of came natural. Even the coaching part was a natural part for me. I had to learn the little things of how to organize a team, how to get people to listen to you. And, but I think just my relationship building skills and my relationship to my players kind of just helped things build themselves. And my girls were super young. My first year, I think I had 1 senior. So I got to build a group, you know, from the bottom up, basically, is what I did. Because Asia Wheeler, who was one of my best players throughout my career coaching over there, was an 8th grader my first year. So literally kind of just got to build a program with that group. And they were hard to leave because we did get close and we did a lot of work. But I played with them. I practiced with them. Even when I was pregnant, like there was days when I was like, they were running, and if I feel like they weren't going hard enough, I'd get on the line and I'd be like, whoever I beat is gonna do 2 more. Like, you better not let the pregnant coach beat you. And we do killers and stuff like that. So just put in a lot of work with those girls. But that's what I love to do. That's what kind of gave me my basketball fix, because I wasn't playing. So I just think that kind of helped me develop them.
What did you learn about yourself through that experience? Because you didn't have players that maybe were household names compared to your time at St. Paul Central, but you spoke of Asia Wheeler, her younger sister, Kiara, she goes by Mimi. They were solid players. You got to coach your younger sister, Jada, after she moved over from Park Center, Jayla Relaford. So you had a lot of scrappy, maybe players that might be role players in other teams, but they all came together. And so maybe they weren't the superstars like Hopkins or Adalia McKenzie at Park Center or the Hale sisters at South. They just keep coming. But each year you got progressively better, and you made a statement. So what did you learn from that experience about yourself, the athletes you coached, and just the whole thing, having to lead a team in that role?
Right. I think it's just kind of learning how to apply what I know and can do to teaching it to somebody else, because I can't get on the court for you. I think that's the hardest part, is I wasn't actively involved. But I also feel like I learned from a lot of people. I listened to a lot of people. I have a lot of other coaches that I've looked up to. And I even think of, teams like Paul Hill's put together. He'll grab a bunch of scrappy players, and they'll be out dominating teams, that have household names. So I took pride in that. I took pride that, we were the underdog for so long. We kind of got to play that sleeper role for a little bit. And just, I was lucky and fortunate to have some great players. I mean, even like Drew Gaston, and she played with my sister for Paul's team. And I remember watching them play in AAU when I came. I was probably in between seasons, and I was like, "Ooh, who's that kid? I like her," and who would have ever thought that I would have got to coach her? So I think I just got lucky to have some great players, and that really grasped and took what I was trying to teach them. I think they really respected it, and they allowed me to put a culture in place. I always say it like my I think all my players were of color except for a couple. I don't think there was a season where I had more than 2. So a pretty dominantly, kids of color. So everywhere we'd get these compliments. These people come up to me and be like, "Your girls are just so respectful, and I just can't believe how disciplined they are." So it always would throw me off. Like, I just wasn't used to that. And I'm like, well, what are they supposed to be like, So I also took pride in having a group of girls that were excellent in everything they did. And I went to bat for them. Even when we went to state, we would get there was some criticism when we were doing the national anthem, because my girls had their heads bowed with their hand on their chest, just saying that they were being disrespectful. And I'm like, they're praying, like, let's give these girls, cut them some slack, and just being able to teach them and help them navigate those moments as females of color and athletes of color. That's the stuff that matters to me. So I love that part of coaching.
How surreal was it to coach your sister?
Mm-hmm. Weird, because, you never think it's going to happen. And then it just the way it happened, because she, was at Park Center and she came as a transfer. So there's just so many pieces that came with it that, I still think back to being like, if I could do it again, would I do anything differently? Because you try to ease her into the team, and we were on our up and up of being super successful, of, making it to state. And then we add her, and she's a great player, and then ends up being a starter. So, you got other players that are affected. And you just want everything to go well. You want everybody to, get along, blend, but building a team is building a team. So it still was a lot of work putting those puzzle pieces together, and then still trying to support her as my sister and know that I'm there for her, but then also trying to kind of treat her like she's everybody else or no different than anybody else. So there's that part of it. But I think she did an amazing job. Like, whenever, you're just built for it, and we were successful, which always helps. I'm glad, we did get a state tournament together. That doesn't happen often, but it worked out. So I'm happy that it was a successful run, and that I did get to experience that with her, and that we did win a state title together. Like, that's pretty cool.
Well, before I get into my next question, Roosevelt Mansfield, who was egging me on where we can find the live stream, he's been showing his support with some of your stories. But on the subject of the state tournaments, you made it twice. Cooper moved to 3A those 2 years, which helped you in the sense that it took you out of the same section as Hopkins. But a title is a title is a title. That being said, as you made your way through, and I think you beat Northfield in 2018. So you won a state championship at Target Center, the same venue where you won 2 titles as a player. You talk about surrealism. I don't think it can get any more surreal than that. Everyone has dreams of winning state, but for you, I have to imagine it maybe felt strange and exciting and euphoric all at the same time that you go back to the state championship and get to do it all over again.
Yeah, I used to tell my players at the time, I'm like, I know you guys are so tired of hearing my state stories, because that was what I always would do, is compare, like I've been there before, and just kind of trying to prep them for that moment of understanding what it was like and what you got to be ready for. But I was blessed that I had that experience as a player to really be able to understand from a coach what my players are going through and what they needed from me as a coach going into the state tournament. So I think that was a bonus for me, that, some other coaches maybe might not have had that experience. So even though my team was brand new to the whole thing, just me kind of having been there helped. So I think it made my players more comfortable than they normally would have been. And I had seniors, I had girls that I got as freshmen and they were seniors now. And so we were ready to kind of showcase what we have been working towards, because like you said, we were in Hopkins and Wyzetta's conference my first 2 years, right? 1, 2, 3. Nope, we changed. My first year was something different than the second and third year. We were with Hopkins and Wyzetta. And at the time, like I'm trying to beat them, so I'm not even thinking about 3A, even though I knew we had a smaller school than a lot of those other schools. I'm trying to compete with Wyzetta and Hopkins. That's my goal. So when we got dropped down to 3A, I'm like, let's go, I felt like we were up there in 4A. So I was really hungry to try and capture that for 3A.
I'm thinking about how tired your players got of hearing all of your state tournament stories. I'm wondering, when you got to the state tournament, did you ever tell them in their pregame huddle, it's like, all right, folks, you're sick. If you're sick of my stories, here's your chance to make your own.
Oh, they've heard all types of stuff from me. When I can't go out there, when I get intense, I get intense. And I think my players learned that about me over the years. I'm very soft-spoken in a lot of the sense, and I'm a very calm person. So when I do turn up, I think everybody kind of knows what time it is, because they're like, okay, if Buford's going, like, we got to get it together. So I was just grateful that they were always responsive.
Well, they were. And how exciting was it to etch your name in history? I don't know when you heard that you were one of 2 women to win a state title as a player and a coach, and you just think in 40 plus years, that's only happened twice. That to me is a statistic I never would have thought about. I thought it would happen more often, but you get to see the culmination of the time and work you put into those athletes, the time and work they put in to improve themselves as athletes and as citizens. And you get to celebrate a state championship with your sister as well. I remember there was a time where it was hard on her. You're getting all the success and the headlines, and it can be hard on younger siblings when you're getting all the attention. Well, now she gets to share in that moment. You never know what will happen next, but when you look back on that, just how cool was it to have all of those moments rolled into one?
Great. Like you said, when I did a lot of my playing and traveling, it goes so fast. So you don't really get to appreciate it sometimes until you get to reflect on it. So as I reflect on it, I definitely appreciate, all of those moments kind of coming together, and being able to coach and play. And like, I'm not even a stats person, so I had no idea. People would tell me things, did you know that? And I'm like, no, I didn't, but thanks for sharing. Because I always feel like if you kind of have a goal in mind and you know what you're reaching for, and you have high expectations for yourself, the accolades will come. All those other things will come. And those are never like the important part, because I feel like when you try to strive for those things, this doesn't happen. It just doesn't work that way. But I take pride in the journey, and I think that that's what matters the most. And even now, like, that I'm not coaching, but I'm sure at some point in the future I'll be back, doing stuff with basketball and sports with my programming. So there's even more to look forward to, which is exciting.
How hard was it to step away from coaching? You got Cooper back into the state tournaments. They reached the semifinals that year. De La Salle and Becker, of course, had strong seasons as well. And I know folks like to knock on 3A, and it's like, hey, they've got some pretty good teams down there. But for you had built up a program that had no history in women's basketball. They had some big names come through here and there, but nothing like your St. Paul Central team or even Como Park had established themselves. De La Salle, Tanisha Scott built up that program and continued the excellence that Faith Johnson Patterson established. So you're coming in and rewriting the narrative at Cooper. And as you stated, you had your reasons to leave, but I have to imagine it was difficult for you to step away after you put in so much time and investment to give a program that didn't have a lot to celebrate when it comes to women's basketball. And now there will always be a state championship banner in those rafters.
Yeah, I think just getting the state championship for that community was huge. Like, even the response after we won, like, we were going to City Hall, we were all over the town just kind of celebrating. And so that was big, not only for the players, but for the community, was huge. And there was another thing I kind of slipped my mind I was going to add, but sorry.
It's the sunlight, isn't it?
No, and I know I was trying to move, and I can't remember the other part I was going to say.
The UV rays have interfered with your memory banks.
Weird, but no, I just think back to some of the girls that I got to coach at Cooper. That's what it was. It was extremely hard for me to leave. And even like I'd been there for 5 years, I just used to wish I was in a different place in my life at the time. Like, I wish I was a little bit older, or, like, the circumstances were different. But one, I was not working in the building at Cooper anymore. I went to Fair. And so I was coaching at Cooper and working at Fair, but Fair is still in the Robbinsdale district, and it was right down the street from Cooper. So that was easy for me. And then when I had to move from there to Roseville for the career change, switch, it became so much more difficult for me to do both, time-wise. Like, I would be up at 6 a.m, getting my kids to daycare and then going to work, and then leaving straight from there to like ship my kids off and run a practice or bring them with me to practice. And then I had to move practice into the evening, which then made my players have to stay and give them a longer day. So we made it work like that for the last 2 years, but it was just really hard to balance. And then just me trying to do everything else and keep everything outside of basketball and my life afloat with children and jobs and just being tired and trying to do a lot. I was working on my master's degree at the time, coaching, full-time parent, full-time job. And I often had to remind people, like, the coaching part was an additional job. Like, I work a whole other full-time job on top of this. And there's everything that goes into coaching, like even high school kids. Like, I put more into it than just the basics, I've had a couple of people be like, oh, you can come and all you got to worry about is doing this and coaching the girls. But like, I'm 100% in or not at all. It's just the type of person I am. So towards the end, I just felt like I couldn't give my 100% all to it. And then that was tough for me. But I had great players like Mimi Wheeler, Andrea Tribble, Jayla, just a bunch of kids that were young that I had to leave when they were sophomores. And that was the hardest part for me, because I wanted to go on another journey with them. But I knew long-term, I just wasn't in a position to sustain it. So I had to meet with them and kind of let that down lightly as possible, because it sucked. But I try to show up, and I still watch them. I've been following their games on Zoom because those kids that were sophomores the year I left are seniors this year. So I'm still keeping tabs on them for sure, and wish them success. Like I try to keep in touch with them moving forward. They always know I'm here for them. So
On that note, someone who is part of your cheering section has chimed in with a couple of comments. Latoya Turk, you might remember her. She's called a few games with me, and one of the 10 million people that that are part of your network. She wanted to say how you changed the culture of the Robbinsdale Cooper program, an amazing coach and mentor. And she said, it sounds like she wouldn't mind if you joined the staff at Roseville at some point.
yes, no. Hello, Latoya. I just want to say hi to her too. But she's another one, has a daughter that played basketball. And again, honored to be able to connect with her and help her on her journey, the good, the bad, the ugly, So that's what it's about for me. And I appreciate those comments. And again, when I'm doing it, it's not something I'm doing it to get, everybody to say, great job. Like this is truly something I care about, that it's genuine to me, and the relationships that I've built with these young athletes. So I appreciate that.
Well, I'm sure if you wanted to join the Roseville staff, Tanisha would find a way to make room.
No, and I said it helped because, we have a newer AD there, but we talk all the time, and we've talked, and even through the coaching journey, when they were hiring for the job, I'm staying out the way, but kind of paying attention at the same time. And when Tanisha got the job, I'm like, well, good. At least I really feel connected because I know Tanisha well. We have a relationship, and I'm like, you'll see me down in the gym from time to time. And I also plan to work with them when I do release some of my programming this spring and summer. So I think that will be exciting. And just knowing that she's there, it will definitely stay in the back of my head.
Well, Latoya heard your remarks there, Kiara, and wanted to respond with, we appreciate you. And I think by we, she means herself and her daughter, Demaya, who will play at Anoka Ramsey at some point. I think they suspended their season this year due to COVID precautions, but she made some moves at Maranatha. I'll say that. Yeah. I got to see her play a few times. So even though you're not coaching or directly involved in the sport of basketball right now, you've talked about some of the programs. I know you brought them up with me. I don't know how much you can reveal yet, but if you don't mind, maybe give us a glimpse. What are some of the things you're working on as you continue to advance your career beyond just coaching basketball?
Yeah, it's been one of those things that's been super hard for me I want to share so bad, but it's so much, like it's a lot, and it's ambitious. So it's something that I plan to build off of and do a lot of things with. But basically, the first part that people will probably see is the fitness part of it. Just working on a lot of different fitness programming, strength training, agility, and that will probably be the first wave. Having that other additional part of coaches, camps and clinics, and doing some training, skill training when it comes to basketball. And I kind of want to have it by level. So very targeted to specific things, whether that's kids that are trying to transition to high school, kids that are transitioning from high school to college, kids that are going from college to pro, just being able to give them programming when it comes to the fitness part, the training part. And then I'm working on a curriculum, which is going to kind of be, that's the part that's hard to describe, but a lot of what we do with Empower right now with coaching the girls and the youth, we kind of focus on confidence, leadership, mental health, and overall wellness. And I'm missing one, resilience. So basically their pillars are pretty set in stone, but my curriculum kind of encompasses everything. So we'll talk about sleep, we'll talk about resilience, we'll talk about, almost any topic that you can think of. My goal is to kind of connect life skills and what you learn through sport. So like resilience is a big one. Perseverance, confidence is probably going to be the main focus of the thing, but just having a lot of actual curriculum that can go out and be accessible to students. And then also I kind of want to target my inner city group and make sure that I'm providing some of the services. Because like even with Empower, a lot of those kids pay to get some of the services, or they, get funded by someone else. Like, for example, we did it with Roseville, and so maybe the school can pitch in to help those kids receive this. But I really want to cater to those groups that don't get that often. We're not talking about mental health, social emotional support, organization skills, all those types of things. I just want to make sure like that group is getting that content also.
What is Empower? I'm just for those who don't know.
Yep. So Empower, so they kind of partner with Team Women. Team Women is like a panel of professional women. As you said, Pam will go and she does a lot of public speaking engagements where they she's worked with a lot of she's worked with everybody, businesses, CEOs, all types of groups of people, military. For us, we focus on groups of girls. So sports teams, we have a all girls like engineer class at Roseville that we did. So we kind of target on those groups. And again, we train and do little sessions on confidence, leadership, resilience, and wellness.
Just wanted to be clear for those who weren't familiar with it. As we reflect on all of the accomplishments and all of the initiatives you have set out to add to your distinguished resume, Kiara, just looking back, we spoke of all of the shared connections you have with your teammates in rec league, high school, college, or your opponents who are part of your circle of friends. We mentioned Tanisha earlier. One of her proteges in coaching was Ashley Ellis-Milan. The two had coached for years at South and De La Salle. Now she's coaching at Eastridge. How cool is it that she's getting her first head coaching opportunity? And I'm wondering, has she reached out to you? Have you reached out to her? Because the two of you have that shared bond as far as coaching and understanding what it's like to mentor young athletes. It's just one of those things. I mean, you never know what will happen after your playing career is done, but seeing what she's doing, what do you make of her first opportunity to lead a program?
I love it. I mean, I've been waiting for her to grab onto one of those jobs. Like you said, she's been assisting coaching with Tanisha for some time. And she's built for it. She's another person that has a great basketball IQ. She was a great leader as a player. So I was excited to see what she would do with her own program. I mean, like you said, there's not a lot of female coaches of color in the state of Minnesota. It's just in general, so to add another one to the group is great. And I always like to just stay connected. So she knows we talk when we see each other, and we'll hit each other up here and there for certain things. But we haven't got to talk a lot recently just because of COVID and everything's a little weird with how things are set up. But to utilize each other. When I start doing my camps and clinics and, everything I do, I always kind of pull from my circle of people. And, they are definitely in that circle. And even the ones that are older than us, like I know you mentioned Crystal Flint, but she's another one that I look up to as used to be a player, former Gopher, coached, and I've seen her coach her son too. So she's coached boys and girls basketball, and just kind of look up to people like that, and to be kind of in that same circle with them it's great. So I'm grateful that other young girls get to experience what they get to bring to the table.
I was just curious because you have a state championship under your belt as a coach and a player. So I'm thinking, maybe Ashley would hit you up for some tips.
Right?
Well, Tanisha does too, though. They won a state title together. I shouldn't sell her short there. So she's got a great pool to draw from as well. And to your point about Crystal, you'll understand this, Kiara. You probably remember there was a time when Facebook groups were a thing. And so it was like, you're from St. Paul, Minneapolis, if you know Kwame or Mitch McDonald.
Right.
And I have amended that. It hasn't become a thing yet, but I have said another way to know if you're from Minneapolis, St. Paul is if you know Crystal Flint.
Right.
because of all the work she has done to empower this community, inner city, suburban, you name it. Doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter who you are, what you look like. She is out there to make a positive difference for others, much like you're doing now. So I had a feeling you'd understand that. So I'm trying to make it a thing to see, because unfortunately Kwame is no longer with us, but Crystal has done a lot too. So yeah, maybe you and I can help turn this into a thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's always those people that we respect. I even think of Mr. Robinson, who we lost.
Jimmy Robinson.
Yeah, I miss him. So I would usually have seen him around state tournament time. So not being able to see him is going to be, a little different. But when I see him, I usually see Crystal. So now I'll just, I'll make sure I chop it up with Crystal, and he will be missed though. He was special.
He was. I had a fellow officiating colleague of his, Lamar Sullivan, on my podcast a couple months ago, and he credits Jimmy for getting him into officiating. But I will always remember his respect for both the men's and women's games. He was at every Lynx game. He and Ed Prohofsky always sat together, and I would see him at the state tournament. I would see him at regular season games. If there was a big men's or women's high school game, he would show up just to watch the game. There was no special reason, no accommodation. He was just a fan of the game. And you and so many others after his passing had something to say about him. I regret that he and I never had a conversation with each other, but I knew when he was there, it had to be a big deal, or it must be a big game. And I know you speak fondly of the people who you look up to as role models. And I know we've talked about Crystal jokingly being one of them, but with what you're doing, Kiara, I wouldn't be surprised if one day people look up to you the same way you look up to Jimmy Robinson and Crystal Flint and so many other names that we have mentioned in this podcast.
Yeah, and that's the good part, is because I kind of do get to think about how those other people have affected what I do now, and it does kind of give you motivation, because it's not easy. Doing certain jobs is not easy, and especially with coaching, when you got to worry about so many different people other than yourself all the time, it gets tough. And so you get to look up to people to kind of inspire you to get through it. And I think of, like, I was going to share this quick story of how I met Mr. Robinson, because he was over at Jimmy Lee across from Central. And I just remember I needed money for something, like some camp or something that I got invited to, but I had to pay. And I just remember at the time, I'm like, oh, where am I going to get this money from? And I don't even remember how we got connected, but I remember I met him over at Jimmy Lee, and he was like, I want to take care of you. What program are you going to? And what, we were looking at the camp or whatever it was that I had to go to. And I remember he paid for it for me in order for me to go. And like, that was like part of the start of my career, of me even making a name for myself, and to be able to showcase myself. And I probably wouldn't have been able to go, at that time without his contribution. And he didn't even really know me, but he knew I was a kid of color that went to Central and then a community, and we had a bright future, and he was willing to invest in that. And we've always talked since then, so we built a relationship, and just over the years got super close, and he's always been a supporter. And he's just one of the people, like, when you see him, you smile and you give him a hug. Like, there's nothing else you can do, because he's a great person.
Roosevelt Mansfield saying, that's love, that's our community. And that is a good point to make, Roosevelt. Even though the dynamics of the inner city basketball conferences have changed, it's more than the tropes you see on TV. When you were playing, and for years afterwards, I always tried to put a few Central games on the schedule. You mentioned North earlier. I hit them up on the boys' side, and I did a few girls' games. Minneapolis South, no different there, with the Hill sisters, and Como Park. Look what Alexis and then Andrea Adams and now Yolanda England is continuing that tradition at Como Park. Central was the talk of the town in your years. Como Park, even when Tiara Taylor spent a year there to play with her sister Erica, didn't have a ton of history, and look what happened to them. So you never want to give up on those city programs, because there are a lot of bright people if you're willing to give them an unbiased and unprejudiced look or view.
Yeah, and they're great. I remember Como had our number when we went and played them my last year coaching at Cooper. We played a close game there, and the girls were balling in the gym, and just brings me back those memories. At this little gym, and it's hyped, and everybody's excited to be there. And even in the loss, you respect it, because the girls really went out and played. And you mentioned Andrea Adams, amazing player. I remember I had a coach. One of my first years coaching was one of her last years, and she was a senior. And I remember we were at Como Park, and we won. I believe we won that game when she was there. But she's coming as soon as she crosses half court, I'm like, you got to pick her up right away. Like she will shoot from right there effortlessly. So, you know, another great player from the inner city and, you know, someone that we connect with and, you know, hopefully we'll definitely get her flowers as she continues to grow.
Yes, I know she was dropping buckets at Texas Tech for a while. And fun story about Andrea, Kiara. I'm sure, well, you and every other coach, the running joke is that in my case, so not this year, but hopefully next season, the first thing they do when they're scouting teams is type in my name to see if I've covered a team that's on their schedule. But she was the first YouTube star on my channel. Now, I can't say I was able to get you hundreds of thousands of views, Kiara. I'm sorry I couldn't do better for you when you were playing at Central, but I'm watching these games, and when you see so many people captivated by these athletes, yes, you know, Paige Becker's, of course, got a lot of attention, but Andrea's senior year, it wasn't Hopkins or Nia Holly that people wanted to see. It was this kid from St. Paul, Andrea Adams, and they couldn't get enough of her. And you know, again, a lot of politics and dynamics have come into play with the city conferences as of late, but you can't deny her impact, and you certainly can't deny the impact you made in a positive way for inner city basketball.
Yeah, I think I'll always be a supporter of that. You know, even the Central girls, I have Shayla Johnson, who played with me when I was at Central, has been helping coach over there, you know, so all those little, it all matters. You know, I love it. And Paige is awesome. I'm happy for Paige and her success in going to UConn. I think that's just big for basketball in general, big for basketball in Minnesota. Even on the boys' side, we got Jalen Suggs, and you know we gotta keep it going though. So we're going to continue to try and breed great athletes, and not just great athletes, but great people out of Minnesota, because we have the talent. So I think we want to showcase it.
Well, you've got two young athletes in the making that I will be keeping an eye out for. I'm sure in about 5-10 years, I'll be going to their games. Just you wait. There were a few things I wanted to ask you as we get close to wrapping up this conversation, Kiara. Looking back at your athletic career, what would you say was the most exciting moment and your most embarrassing moment?
Ooh. Like forever?
You take it however you want it, however you want to. This is your podcast, your story.
As a player or in general?
It could be as a player, as a coach,
Okay.
just like the most exciting moment you've ever had and the most embarrassing moment that you look back on and go, I can't believe that happened.
Winning state, I think, is probably most exciting for sure.
Which one, as a player or as a coach?
Both. I think the combination of the two. But as a player was, I would say, the year we went undefeated. Just the whole year. It's hard to beat. That's hard to compete with. Most embarrassing, I'm going to be specific because I have my most embarrassing basketball moment was we were at Purdue. I hated playing at Purdue. I always played bad. Illinois I played good at. Purdue, terrible every time. I don't know what it was. I was cursed at that gym. But Lindsay Wisdom Hilton, do you remember her?
Yes, I think
Post player.
she went pro for a little while.
Yep. So big post player, super long arms. I remember I was a freshman, I think, or a sophomore, maybe. I think I was a sophomore, actually. I was young. And I just remember we were at Purdue, and it was right before halftime, and I got a steal, and I was dribbling down full court, and I just glanced back. No, actually, I didn't glance back. I looked at the screen, and I can see she was chasing me, right? And I was going to do the layup. I had a wide open layup. And as soon as I get to the basket, like, I don't know if I panicked or what happened, but I just hit it off the backboard really hard. Like, it just went flying off the backboard. And the buzzer rang for halftime. So I just remember I just went straight to the locker room. But that was my probably most embarrassing college moment with basketball, which is probably pretty good. I feel like people probably have worse stories, but so I guess I'm thankful that that's my most embarrassing basketball moment. Trying to think of another. I'm sure there's another bad loss in there that stings, but.
Well, that's why I said most embarrassing, not worse, like losses, because you know this, playing basketball with so many games and so many variables, losses are going to happen. It's really, really hard to go undefeated in high school or college, as easy as you made it look, or as easy as Hopkins made it look a couple of years ago. It takes a lot to accomplish that. So I'm not looking more at like the losses, because again, that happens and I don't base my friendships on that. But yeah, having a shot that goes off the backboard. Yeah, I could see like that's actually a common one that I hear from players.
Though, like, super hard. Boom, it was a rocket. I don't know where that energy came from, but
at least you didn't hit anybody in the face with that shot. I think that would have been even worse.
I was just thankful it was halftime and I got to leave the court right after that. I think that was the best part.
And like nobody will notice, right?
Right. Let's just act like that never happened. It was a buzzer beater. That's what it was.
Well, it can't be that embarrassing. You're trying to beat the buzzer.
Right.
You don't have time to get the arc down and all. You're trying to get it off. But another thing that I ask is based on a publication that I buy every year, breakdown that they do the encyclopedias. And I don't know if you took part in this, but one of the questions they ask is what you would consider the most unusual thing about yourself. So Kiara, what are some interests or hobbies or things that people wouldn't necessarily know about you if they met you for the first time?
That's a hard question. I don't know. I'm pretty open. So I feel like people that know me, but I think that's the catch. I think people do also get surprised when I start talking sometimes and they're like, oh, okay, she's interesting.
What? Like, what do you mean she's interesting? Like, I don't get it. Because what are you implying?
I'm soft-spoken, I'm really friendly, but like I don't know, like I'm pretty outspoken at the same time in a polite way. I'm trying to think of something specific. I don't know. That's a hard one. That's when I had to think about ahead of time. Yeah, I feel like people they see other sides of me when they're in certain situations with me, and then they're kind of like, but yeah, I can't think of anything specific really.
Well, maybe one of your family members or friends will have something to say, or one of your two kids that are desperate for camera time.
They just came home from school, so they just walked in the door. I'm like, everybody be quiet.
It's okay. This is Zoom. And again, those are two names I'm probably going to have to remember at some point, right? So why not start early?
Hopefully.
London and D-Star, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And on that subject, you've experienced a lot through your involvement in basketball, winning 2 state championships, getting to play Division I, and you got to play all 4 years, and thankfully no serious injuries. You spoke of having to deal with some aches and pains, and you got banged up, but wasn't enough to keep you away for an extended period. So 2 state titles as a high school athlete, 1,500 plus points in college, a state championship as a head coach for Robbinsdale Cooper, and so many other stories. I think you could write your own memoir if you wanted to. But when you consider everything you've reached up to this point, if you were able to meet up with a younger version of yourself, what would you tell her?
Just to be more confident, I think. I think there was times like where I would doubt myself or just not see myself for what I was. And I think that kind of can stunt your growth a little bit. So I think I would have been more confident and took more risks, I think would be my advice to my younger self.
And on a related subject, even though you can't meet with your younger version of yourself, how would you say all the friendships you have forged, whether it was Jimmy Robinson or Crystal Flint, who served as mentors, or your circle of teammates and competitors who were all part of your extended family, Ashley Ellis-Milan, Kasheen Alexander, Angel Robinson, Jenna Smith. You got to play with Rachel Banham, as we noted, for a year. You've been able to meet with so many people who have continued to support you through all these years. What have you gained from all of these friendships and this ongoing stream of support?
The experience is number one. And then for like teammates, I think all athletes, like they're like, people are like family, so you build these families and that's what it feels like. You feel like you have extended family. And so we feel like when you need someone Or, it's like if I could think, if I need something, I probably know someone that does that thing or can lead me or point me in the right direction. And even those are the people that I do stuff for. There's other things that they contribute to me as well. And so, I've just learned so much from people. I do believe that to be successful, like, we need each other, we rely on each other. So I absorb a lot from other people, and I try to give and take and make it be a balance.
And moving forward, it sounds like you'll find a way to stay involved in basketball, but you got to write a chapter in history when it comes to female coaches of color, the way Tanisha Scott did when she won a state title at De La Salle. Faith Johnson Patterson, of course, winning 8, 5 at North, 3 at De La Salle. And even those who don't win state championships still make a difference. And so for others who may be looking to get into that field, as we've seen in the NFL, as we've seen in other pro leagues, it is not the easiest environment to stake a claim in. But based on your experience, what advice would you give for other women of color who might be considering a path in coaching?
Yeah, I mean, definitely pursue it. Like, when you have an opportunity, I would definitely pursue it because our kids need it. And for me, it's about those little things and the things that aren't the X's and O's, right? So really just dedicating that time to the other work that comes along with being a coach, because that's what our kids need, and that's what basketball needs, and women's basketball needs. And players want to play and be around people that look like them, and sometimes people that don't look like them. For example, I played for, besides my mom, all males until I got to college. Pam Borton was my first female coach. So just giving, kids a different perspective. Usually when you're in sports, you're around a lot of males. And even with training, like, I'm doing some fitness training and I'm working out, various girls and who have formerly worked out with guys, that lift, and they're like, we never did any of this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, because you're doing workouts for men, just little things like that. So just being able to be there for our kids and the generation, or even other people my age or your age. I think we help each other. I learn from people my age all the time.
I'm scared to think what you've learned from me. We've known each other for so long. I'm like, is there something I should be worried about?
No, just know all your skills. I just absorbed them. That's what's happening. No.
Oh, so you're going after my job, is what you're implying. It's like one day you want to become a broadcaster, isn't it? That's your plan.
I actually have explored some broadcasting. I may do some of that in the future, but that's what I went to school for, was to do originally PR, and I wanted to stay in sports, and I did media and journalism. So I'll probably dibble and dabble in that a little bit. But no, I told you, I'll have some video work projects for you to do with me soon. Because I can't be in front and behind the camera, Mike. So
I think you could. You've displayed many talents over the years, and I've learned not to underestimate your skills. As crazy as this question might sound, is there anything else about your story that you would like to touch on?
No, I talked a lot. So I know it's something, I've played basketball for so long, I feel like I could talk about it all day. And I'm always open to questions, when people have questions for me about things. I think that's what I enjoy about, talking with younger girls. Even with broadcasting, like when you're talking about that, I was thinking of Leah B. Olson, right? Like, I looked up to her. She ended up being my African-American mentor in the African-American leadership program when I was at the U. So, I just think of things like that, and people told me to broadcast for a while. I'm like, no, I don't want to. But then, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should just do a couple games and try it out and see how it goes.
Well, I'll give you this, Kiara, to add to that point. I got Olivia Antilla on board last year because she does a lot of coaching in AAU and does a lot of work with athletes. Now, she graduated from high school. Her high school career was after you had moved to Minnesota, but she was a bona fide player at Florida A&M for a couple of years, but then came back and stays involved. And so I had her call some games with me, and she loved it. She always wants to promote the women's game, and we're trying to get her name out there. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not the biggest name in town, So you're not going to see me calling games for ESPN yet, but I'm perfectly fine stepping aside if it means giving you a chance to showcase your abilities or even just learn what broadcasting is all about, because it goes back to representation. I understand how much that matters. And whether that was as a coach at Cooper or being in the broadcast booth, for athletes to see and hear someone like them. You mentioned Leah B. Olson, who is a good friend of mine. And that's an example of someone who looks like you in that position that you've explored. So I'm all for it. And as I said, when it's safe to bring back the big crowds and have all these outlets again, I think it'd be a lot of fun.
I was muted for a second, but yeah, and I appreciate that. And for me, one thing that I've always appreciated about you is just giving people the platform. I think, you have your podcast now, and I know you, you're sharing that, and it's a little bit more social now. But even before, we were on social media the way that we are now, just providing a platform. And I appreciate you for providing a platform for me as a player. Like even now, if you type my name into Google, I say this all the time, you type my name into Google right now, my videos that come up, go look and see who published them. You did, even some of my Gopher Sports ones that were on the Gopher Sports YouTube channel, they're gone, so if it wasn't for you covering me and giving me a platform, they wouldn't even be there. You'd search my name and nobody would come up. So I appreciate that in many different realms and fashions of you just continue to give a platform, and you reached out when the Black Lives Matter thing happened and wanted to give people a platform. So I do appreciate you doing that and continue to do the work, even when you feel like, your name isn't the biggest name in town. That's the work that matters. So
I do want to leave you with this, though. Since you've played against several of your colleagues as a high school and college athlete and still do with the Y Leagues, who would you say is the toughest competitor that you've had to go against?
That's a hard one. I think it's just the combination of all of us playing each other, because we know each other so well and we know each other's game so well. And most of the time we play together. And so it's kind of unfair but that's what we love. So we love playing when it's college. They have like the college nights, and the kids that are currently playing college will play. And then here we go, we're old, but we've played. We like playing them because they're like in better shape than us. So like we have to just try to outsmart them a little bit. But we like playing with each other. I'm trying to think though, like who's competitive. I just know we're all like sore losers. We hate losing to each other. I think that's what it will be nice to each other, but we're low-key salty if we lose to each other. That's for sure. With Ashley or Jenna or anybody.
Spoken like a true athlete, because personally I'm thinking, what would a one-on-one look like between yourself or Ashley, or yourself and D? I think D still has some moves in there, or Danielle, because they're all still involved, or Tanisha. I covered Tanisha and Ashley when they were playing for the Black Ice, and they still had it. Tanisha still being the point guard. Jenna Smith, of course, got to play with Ashley in a semi-pro team before the Black Ice, and
I'm lucky that we all kind of play different positions. Like, I don't have to guard Ashley. Like I'm trying to give everybody else tips, whoever. So this is what you got to do, right? But I'll run by and try to swipe it. But yeah, we all kind of play different positions too, which I think is helpful. Me and Courtney used to always go at it, but we've played together in the Y League for the last few years, but we always used to battle. That was a good one.
I take it's much more fun playing alongside Courtney than going against her.
Yeah, she's fun though. I like her. She's spicy.
Spicy? Spicy. And you know what?
I'll describe her.
I want to give her a plug too before we wrap up, because she still participates and contributes to Chaska. I had Mallory Heyer on not long after she verbally committed to Minnesota, and she spoke of Courtney Boylan sticking around and helping the younger generations out and having to scrimmage against her, actually. So much like yourself, Courtney is all about helping the next generation. And it goes back to that sense of family. Yeah, maybe you and your family were a little bit salty that she got Miss Basketball and you didn't. But again, it's not about awards or points. It's about the friendships and the values. And using these opportunities to make a difference. And I'm sure I'm going to have some explaining to do and some questions to answer when Ashley and Tanisha see this podcast and wonder why I'm giving them so much shade here. But I feel I can get away with it because you have a mutual respect for each other. And you've talked about the respect you had for the group of seniors when you were a freshman at St. Paul Central and how they instill what it takes to be successful as an athlete and a citizen. And that has stuck with you through raising a family, through coaching, through all of the twists and turns, expected or not. You find a way to make the most of it. And that's what I've always admired about you, Kiara. I will agree that you are a soft-spoken individual, but it's almost like you know when to speak your mind. There are people out there who will talk just to make themselves heard. You want to make sure if I'm going to contribute, there's a good reason behind it.
Yeah, and like I said before, like I'm in it or I'm not. You're buying into it or you're not, So like I said, and even when I'm working on stuff, like I'm real quiet, but when it's time to get to work or grind or accomplish something, like I'm very focused on kind of accomplishing whatever that is.
Well, Kiara, I do want to thank you for coming on. And when you spoke of all the videos you can find that I published when you type in your name, and here we are, this will be another video added to that list. So either I'm not helping you stay incognito or I'm giving you more of a platform, but that's why I do it. I'm not doing this for the purpose of getting famous, even though my YouTube account passed 10,000 subscribers last year. Like, hey, that's just a bonus. I don't do this expecting to become a household name. You should see the look on my face when people recognize me. I still shudder. I'm like, wait, you're Mike? Like, oh yeah, that's right. People watch this stuff. But the last few years, ever since I got into my own self-branding, meeting up with parents or coaches, what you do matters. And even if I don't look like you, or if I don't look like the athletes I'm covering, it still matters to them that someone is giving them a platform. And I always enjoyed going to St. Paul Central in the days when they were competing for section and state titles. And I would love to see them get back there again, if for no other reason, to give Como Park something to look forward to, because their players and coaches have always talked about the lack of competitiveness in the St. Paul City Conference and how it frustrates them because they want to get better. And in conference, they don't have a way of doing that. But one day I'd like to think that Como and Central will have a rivalry again, but you got to
for that. I know. Hey, I never lost a conference game. What was my thing? My 98-0 or something crazy like that. Like, we need that competitiveness.
And Como Park hasn't lost one in 5-6 years now.
Ooh, yeah.
But hey, Como Park, I got to give them props. St. Paul Central, they were the talk of the town. And before Willie Taylor stepped in, Harding was the dominant team in the conference. So there's been a lot of inner city talent. And again, I'm just glad I got to play a part in documenting that. Someone asked me what got me into women's basketball. And I said, well, because I knew there was this great team in my backyard that was close to home. So I could always hit up Central for a few games. And you never disappointed, even in games you didn't win. So again, I'll never forget the sellout crowd. And there were glimpses, but that 07 Twin Cities game, seeing the sellout crowd, and I've been to some games with packed houses since then, but when you see a sellout gym for a women's basketball game, because I'm thinking, there'll be some people, but I was like, no, people knew who you were about. They knew what Tayler Hill was about. And I can't speak to the players who came before you, like Tamara Moore or the Miller twins or Maury Horton, who were captivating in their own way, but you played a part in convincing myself and anyone else who gives women's basketball a chance that there is an audience out there. How often do you get to play in front of a sellout crowd as a women's basketball player? That's something you live for. I know the Hopkins players, when I talked to them about it, they were in awe when their Wyzetta games drew big crowds. And you got to play a part in that as well. So yeah, thanks for helping all of us instill the idea that women's basketball can be entertaining and captivating.
Yes, no, that's what it's about. And I just love to play. I was always grateful that people wanted to watch. I never cared either way, but it is special. Like I said, the reflection of it is the most special thing to look back on. So I definitely appreciated all the support I've gotten over the years. And yeah, it's been bittersweet to think about it, and makes me hungry to stick around it and stay involved in basketball and sports.
Well, I have no doubt you will stay involved. And I'll say this, let's be thankful that our era came after the short shorts and the mullets of your mother's time.
Yeah, my legs. I would have struggled with these little shorts, my little skinny legs. That wouldn't have been too appealing.
Although I'm hearing short shorts are now coming back in a little more.
They are. No, yeah. Now my youth stuff, I can't even wear it because I look silly. It's so big. My pants, like I have to tie the drawstring super tight, and my shirt is just super baggy. We used to roll it up all the time. My kids would tease me, even when I was coaching. Coach, why you got your socks like that? They're giving me a hard time. Times have definitely changed.
Well, and that's the thing. The only constant is change, and we just try to keep up with it. But Kiara, thanks again. We covered a lot of ground, and I feel like we could cover more. But like I said, I would love to bring some of your fellow friends on. I know this idea started when Tanisha talked about having a roundtable of Black female coaches in Minnesota high school hoops come together to share their thoughts. And we touched on that, but I'd love to see the conversations and the points you all would make if you had a chance to come together. I will ask you this though, now that you're a fan, at least until you coach or play again, who do you cheer for when Roseville and Eastridge play each other?
Roseville, because I work there.
Is Ashley okay with that?
If I was at the game cheering for the other team, I don't think my students would appreciate me too much at school. But no, both of them, no, I support both of them. And I always, if it's not my team, I'm usually always neutral. I grew up in Minnesota sports, so Vikings, Timberwolves, it's just hard to really get invested in other teams. So I've learned to just invest in my own team because, again, I'm a sore loser. But no, I support both of them, and I want both of them to be successful for sure. But if we were at the game, I don't know. Maybe I'll clap for both, but I definitely have to cheer for Roseville because that's where I work. So that's where my.
Well, I'm sure Tanisha will enjoy that answer. For Ashley, that might give her a little extra motivation.
Yeah.
To go out and beat Roseville so she could. Well,
she's already got one, so we got.
That's true.
Catching up to do.
That's true. I know, like, when it's safe to gather again, that is a series I want to see. Mm-hmm. I remember that was something Tanisha looked forward to when she got to go against her mentor in Crystal Flint when De La Salle and Cretin-Derham Hall played each other. It started at North, and they've always been able to keep that series thanks to their schools, and they get to play each other twice. Now Tanisha gets to play her close friend twice, and I think as much as they love to talk smack about each other, much like you've spoken highly of them, I think Tanisha would say the same thing. You don't become savage if you're not that close.
Right.
And I'm sure Tanisha loves that, to see one of her proteges, someone who's been with her all those years, get that opportunity. And it also dawned on me too, it's happened once already, but I don't think you had this chance or you were able to do it yourself yet, but Ashley, she had to go against your old coach already.
Yeah, I tried to play Willie quite a few times, and he refused to play me. And I always gave him a hard time that he was afraid to lose to me, is what it was.
So I think you figured out the secret. You just need to find a Suburban East team at some point, because then Willie can't avoid you.
Right, I know, right? Yeah, he got lucky.
You got lucky for now, but if there's an opening in the Suburban East, watch out. Again, no, all in good fun. And this was a lot of fun. I know we've interviewed each other, or I should say I've interviewed you over the years, once in high school, once in college, but never with this level of detail. And like you said, you have a lot to say, even if you come off as soft-spoken. I'm glad you were willing to share a lot about yourself with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on, and we'll connect when I get to release some stuff. Maybe I'll be able to share some more, but I do plan to put a lot of my experiences into my curriculum that I'm coming up with to share with everybody. So hopefully we can work on that in the future. And yeah, thanks for anybody that tuned in to us. We've been talking for 2 hours. So if you've listened to 2 hours, bless you. Or you can rewind and come back at some point, but it's there and I'm open. And like I said, I'm an open book, and I'm there for people that want to reach out and talk about anything or any ideas. So thank you.
Well, there's a lot of people rooting for you. I'm one of them, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
Thank you.
Kiara Buford, who will continue raising her son and daughter, London and D-Star, and we will find her on the basketball court as a fan and maybe back out there as a coach. Who knows? But the potential is limitless. And if you want to be a guest on a future episode of this podcast, just contact us on social media at the Mike Peden on Twitter or Instagram. All you need is a good story, and we're happy to share it. So until next time, thanks for watching.